There comes a time in every person's life when they realize that the world will not bend to their will. The job won't always work out. The people won't always stay. The plans will often fall apart. And in that moment, when the storm rolls in and then nothing is going your way, you're left with only one thing, yourself. And that, my friend, is exactly where the real power lies. Because the most important battle you will ever fight is not out there in the world. It's within you. It's between the version of yourself that reacts and the version that responds. Between the voice that says, "This is unfair," and the voice that whispers, "This is your opportunity," the voice that lashes out and the one that leans in. True change doesn't begin with external circumstances shifting in our favor. It begins deep within, in the quiet, often overlooked corners of our personal discipline, specifically in our ability to control ourselves. Self-control is not about forcing yourself to be perfect or pretending you don't have emotions. It's about cultivating the awareness and maturity to not let those emotions rule your decisions. When you begin to gain control over yourself, you step into the beginning stages of true self-mastery. This is where transformation begins. It's not in a moment of success or breakthrough, but in the mundane, everyday decisions that shape who you are becoming. Every single day, you are faced with situations that test your patience, challenge your integrity, and provoke your emotions. These are the moments that matter most. When someone disrespects you, when an opportunity doesn't come your way, when life seems unfair, your reaction in those moments reveals your level of self-control. Most people believe strength is in action, in dominance, in reacting quickly or defending oneself loudly. But true strength lies in restraint. The power to pause, reflect, and respond intentionally is a rare and profound skill that, when mastered, changes the entire trajectory of your life. Think about the times when you reacted without thinking. How many of those moments led to regret? How many apologies did you have to make? How much emotional energy did you waste replaying that situation in your mind, wishing you had handled it differently? Now imagine the opposite. Imagine being the kind of person who, in the heat of the moment, could take a breath, observe their emotions without becoming them, and choose a response that aligns with their long-term values instead of their short-term emotions. That's not weakness, that's power. And that kind of inner power builds real confidence. Not the kind that comes from validation, but the kind that comes from knowing you are in control of your inner world. Self-control is a skill. It's not something you're born with, and it's not something that suddenly appears after reading a few quotes or listening to a few motivational speeches. It's a practice, one that you must intentionally commit to every single day. It starts with noticing your thoughts, because every reaction begins in the mind. The moment you become aware of a thought that might lead you to speak or act out of alignment, you've created a moment of choice. That's the doorway to self-control. That moment right there, the pause before the reaction, that's your power. And the more you practice pausing, the more natural it becomes. This practice requires a deep understanding of your own patterns. What are the things that trigger you? What people, words, environments, or even memories cause you to lose your peace? Identifying them doesn't make you weak. It gives you a roadmap, because once you understand what provokes a reaction in you, you can begin to prepare for those moments. You can begin to rewire your response. This isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about channeling them. Anger can become clarity. Sadness can become introspection. Frustration can become motivation, but only when you choose to process emotions instead of acting on them impulsively. And here's something most people never consider. Self-control doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. When you are no longer at the mercy of your impulses, you stop making decisions that sabotage your growth. You stop burning bridges, wasting energy, and creating chaos in your relationships and career. You become someone others can trust, not just because you're kind, but because you're consistent, you're stable, you're intentional. People gravitate toward that kind of energy. Not only does it improve your relationships, it opens up opportunities you wouldn't otherwise see, simply because you were calm and focused enough to notice them. Over time, The habit of controlling yourself becomes less about discipline and more about identity. It becomes part of who you are. You no longer need to force it because it's how you operate. You've trained yourself to live above the noise, to respond instead of react, to stay grounded even when life feels uncertain. That is self mastery. That is the root of real transformation. And that is where everything in your life begins to shift, not because the world has changed, but because you have. And once you change, your entire reality changes with you. What happens to you in life holds far less power than how you choose to respond to it. The reality that surrounds you is shaped not by external events, but by the way you process them internally. Every moment, every conversation, if every disappointment or success becomes a building block of your personal world, not because of the event itself, but because of your reaction to it. This is why emotional discipline is not just a self-help concept. It's a necessary tool for building a life of peace, direction, and purpose. When you understand that your reactions hold the steering wheel of your life, you stop trying to control what happens and start mastering how you handle it. You've probably experienced situations that caught you off guard, sudden betrayal, a financial setback, a dream slipping through your fingers. These moments feel like walls falling in on your plans, but the real damage rarely comes from the event itself. It comes from what you do next. Do you spiral into self-doubt? Do you lash out? Do you quit? Or do you take a breath, remind yourself of your vision, and choose a response that pushes you forward instead of pulling you under? The space between stimulus and response is the space where your future is written, and you are the one holding the pen. Most people go through life in reaction mode. Someone says something disrespectful and they snap back. A challenge shows up and they panic. Their emotional triggers are so sensitive, their peace is constantly hijacked. But the truth is, you are not a slave to your feelings. You don't have to react the way you always have. You can feel hurt and still respond with wisdom. You can feel angry and still respond with maturity. That's what emotional discipline is. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the elevation of choice. When you make your emotions the boss of your life, they will lead you in circles. One minute you feel motivated, the next you feel lost. One moment you're hopeful, the next you're filled with fear. You end up trapped in a roller coaster of mood-driven decisions. But when you take a step back and recognize that your response is the true power, you begin to separate your identity from your immediate emotions. You understand that just because something upsets you, it doesn't have to define you. Just because something hurts you, it doesn't have to control you. Think about how much peace and progress we sacrifice because we don't pause before reacting. One heated argument can destroy trust that took years to build. One impulsive decision can sabotage a goal you've worked on for months. But imagine if you had stopped, breathed, and chosen a response that reflected your highest self. That is the kind of power that changes everything, not just your relationships and career, but the way you see the world. Your reactions are your signature. They tell people who you are, what you value, and whether or not you are someone they can rely on. Emotional consistency builds respect. When people see that you don't lose your temper, that you stay grounded, that you don't take everything personally, they begin to trust you, not because you're always right, but because you're always present. You don't bring chaos, you bring calm. And in a world full of noise, that calm is magnetic. This level of emotional maturity doesn't mean you never feel shaken. It means you've trained yourself to respond from intention instead of injury. You stop letting your past wounds speak louder than your present wisdom. You stop allowing temporary feelings to cause permanent damage. And you begin to see that your reality is simply a reflection of your ability to remain focused, even in the midst of storms. This shift in how you respond not only transforms your inner life, but it begins to shape your external world. You make better decisions. You attract healthier people. You stop chasing things that don't align with your values. You become more strategic, more grounded, and more connected to your vision. Life still happens, but you are no longer tossed by every wave. You become steady, not because life got easier, because you got stronger. And that strength is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't seek validation, it just moves forward with clarity. And that's when you realize your reality has been changing all along, not because you forced it, but because you chose to show up differently, because you decided to take control of the only thing you ever truly had power over. Your response, discipline, is often misunderstood. Many people associate it with rigidity, restriction, or punishment. They see it as something that takes away freedom rather than something that gives it. But that view couldn't be further from the truth. Real discipline is not a cage, it's a key. It doesn't confine you, it liberates you. When you develop the ability to discipline your thoughts, your habits, and your responses, you're not limiting your life, you're unlocking its full potential. Because without discipline, you're a prisoner to impulse, emotion, and circumstance. But with discipline, you become the author of your own path, creating with intention rather than simply reacting to the world around you. Freedom without structure becomes chaos. We've all seen it. People who have no boundaries, no focus, no self control, they chase whatever feels good in the moment, only to find themselves exhausted, lost, and unfulfilled. They eat what they want, say what they feel, spend how they please, and chase every fleeting desire, yet wonder why their life lacks peace, consistency, or meaning. That's not freedom, that's bondage in disguise. True freedom is having the ability to say no to the wrong thing so you can say yes to what really matters. It's the power to act according to your values rather than your moods. Discipline gives you direction, it gives you clarity. When you wake up every day with a structure, mental, emotional, physical, you begin to build a life that aligns with your highest self. You're no longer swayed by every temptation or derailed by every setback. You don't need motivation to carry you forward because you've built a system of habits that do the lifting for you. That's where the transformation happens, not in the hype of one exciting moment, but in the quiet decision to keep showing up day after day, even when you don't feel like it. This kind of consistency becomes your foundation. And from that foundation, everything else grows. Your creativity flourishes because your mind isn't clouded by chaos. Your relationships deepen because you bring intentional energy into them. Your self-worth expands because you know you are showing up for your own goals, your own growth, and your own future. The confidence that comes from discipline isn't loud, it's steady. It's not built on achievement, but on alignment. When your actions match your values, you stop seeking external validation. You start feeling fulfilled from within. Now, does discipline require sacrifice? Yes, but that sacrifice is temporary. Skipping a night out to work on your dream, saying no to instant gratification, setting boundaries that protect your energy. These are small sacrifices compared to the freedom you gain in the long run. You give up short-term pleasure, but you gain long-term peace. You give up convenience, but you gain clarity. You give up comfort, but you gain purpose. And the truth is, you're always sacrificing something. The question is, are you sacrificing your future for your comfort, or are you sacrificing your comfort for your future? People who master discipline are not superhuman. They simply understand the value of intentional living. They have trained their minds to resist distraction, delay gratification, and focus on the things that build rather than break. And over time, that training pays off, not just in career success or personal growth, but in mental freedom. Because when you are no longer ruled by cravings, when you are no longer reactive to every trigger, you start to feel in control. You become less anxious, less scattered, more grounded, more present. And it's important to understand that discipline doesn't mean your life becomes boring or cold. Quite the opposite, it becomes more meaningful. Because when you choose discipline, you create space for what truly matters. You no longer waste energy on things that don't serve your growth. You stop chasing validation, drama, or distraction. And in that stillness, you reconnect with your purpose. You remember why you started. You realign with your vision. You begin to move from survival to significance. Discipline is the quiet architect behind every great life. It may not get applause, and it may not always feel good in the moment, but its results speak volumes. It creates internal peace, external success, and lasting impact. It allows you to walk through life with a sense of power, knowing that you are not controlled by impulse. opinion, or circumstance. You are in control. You are leading your life, not just watching it happen. And in that discipline, you find the deepest kind of freedom there is the freedom to become exactly who you were meant to be in a world that constantly demands noise, reaction, and immediacy. Stillness has become a lost art. Yet it is within stillness that true vision is born. When you take a moment to pause, to sit quietly with your thoughts, you begin to hear a different kind of wisdom, one that doesn't shout, one that isn't driven by fear or urgency, but one that gently guides you toward clarity. The ability to be still is not a weakness. It's a deep inner strength that allows you to rise above confusion, to separate what's real from what's noise, and to choose response over reaction. Most people live in a state of constant reaction, emails, notifications, news, opinions, expectations. It never stops. But what if, instead of reacting to everything, you simply paused? That pause is not empty. It's powerful. It gives you the space to reconnect with your values, your purpose, and your inner compass. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It doesn't mean sitting around doing nothing. Stillness is active observation. It's listening deeply before speaking. It's thinking intentionally before acting. It's stepping back, not because you're afraid, but because you understand the value of direction over speed. So often people rush into decisions, conversations, or commitments without checking in with themselves. And later, they look back with regret, wondering how things could have gone differently. Stillness could have given them that answer. When you give yourself permission to pause, even in the middle of chaos, you give yourself a chance to see things more clearly. You stop operating from panic and start leading with purpose. In moments of anger or pressure, stillness allows you to regulate your emotions. You no longer let the heat of the moment decide your next move. You observe your feelings without being consumed by them. You recognize that just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it is. Just because someone demands a response doesn't mean you owe one immediately. Stillness teaches you that you are not required to match the speed or emotion of the world around you. You can slow it all down. You can breathe. And in that breath, you find truth. Vision doesn't come when your mind is cluttered with noise. You cannot plan a meaningful life from a place of chaos. You need space to think, to imagine, to reflect. That's what stillness gives you. It opens the door to vision, not just temporary goals, but true insight about who you are and where you're going. Many of the greatest ideas, decisions, and breakthroughs in history came during moments of solitude. The world celebrates the outcome, but the process often begins in quiet, undistracted thought. When you allow yourself to sit in that quiet, when you listen to your own inner wisdom instead of everyone else's opinions, that's when vision begins to form. Stillness also deepens your relationship with yourself. In the silence, you begin to hear the parts of you that often go unheard, the fears that need compassion, the dreams that have been buried under distraction, the intuition that's been drowned out by other people's voices. You begin to understand yourself, not as a role or a label or a performer of tasks, but as a full, layered human being with meaning and direction. That kind of self-awareness is rare and it's priceless. It allows you to live with integrity because your actions are rooted in knowing who you are and what truly matters to you. The practice of stillness is not something that always comes easily, especially in a fast-paced culture that glorifies hustle and productivity. But the more you prioritize stillness, the more you begin to see its benefits. You begin to make decisions with more confidence. You start to feel less anxious and more grounded. You notice that you no longer get pulled into every argument or dragged down by every inconvenience. You become selective with your energy, more mindful with your words, and more deliberate with your time. That's not just personal growth, that's leadership. It's the kind of leadership that starts from within and radiates outward. When you embrace stillness as a tool for vision, you begin to live intentionally rather than reactively. You start moving not because you're being pushed, but because you've chosen a direction. You stop letting urgency lead and you start letting clarity guide. And as your inner world becomes more peaceful, your outer world begins to reflect that peace. You realize that everything you were chasing, stability, understanding, purpose was always waiting on the other side of a pause, stillness gave you the space to receive it. Transformation is often misunderstood as a sudden breakthrough, a single moment that changes everything. But in reality, the kind of transformation that lasts, the kind that rewires your thoughts, habits, and identity doesn't happen in one grand, dramatic event. It happens slowly, steadily, and quietly through the consistent, intentional practice of self awareness and discipline. It's not about waiting for the perfect day to start or the perfect moment to arrive. It's about making the decision to begin now with what you have where you are and committing to that decision every single day, even when it's hard, when it feels like nothing is changing. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you take a step forward. It may not be visible at first. There may be no applause, no dramatic shift, no instant reward. But underneath the surface, your mind is rewiring, your character is being shaped, and slowly your reality begins to shift. This process is not glamorous. It's not always exciting. In fact, it often feels repetitive. It's waking up early when you'd rather sleep in. It's saying no to habits that used to numb your pain. It's choosing to respond with calm when you've been conditioned to react with anger. These moments, small and ordinary as they may seem, are where the true transformation begins. What separates people who grow from those who stay stuck is not talent, luck, or intelligence. It's commitment to the process. It's showing up again and again. Even when you feel discouraged, it's understanding that results take time and that consistency will take you further than intensity ever will. One intense workout doesn't make you healthy. One kind word doesn't heal a broken relationship. One day of journaling doesn't restore inner peace, but repeated over time, these actions compound. They create momentum, and eventually they create change. There's a reason so many people start strong and then give up. They're addicted to motivation, not discipline. They chase the high of beginning, but aren't prepared for the monotony of maintenance. Real transformation requires patience. It asks you to trust yourself in the middle of the process when the excitement has faded and the work feels boring or hard. It's in those middle spaces between the decision to change and the visible results that your character is tested and refined. That's where the real work is done. Not on the mountaintop, but in the valley, not in front of a crowd, but in solitude, not when everyone is cheering, but when no one is watching. You begin to understand that your habits are the blueprint of your future, that how you treat your mornings, how you talk to yourself, how you respond to challenges, these things shape your reality far more than any external success. Transformation is not a destination, it's a lifestyle. It's something you cultivate through intention and choice, through reflection and adjustment. It requires honesty. You have to be willing to admit what isn't working. You have to be willing to face the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding, not to shame them, but to bring them into the light so they can be healed and redirected. And as you continue this daily practice, something beautiful happens. Beautiful happens. You start to see yourself differently, not because someone else told you you're enough, but because you've proven it to yourself. You begin to trust your own strength. You begin to respect your own boundaries. You stop needing validation from others because you've built a quiet confidence from within. This isn't the result of one breakthrough. It's the result of 1,000 choices, choices that aligned with your purpose, choices that honored your values, choices that weren't always easy, but were always worth it. So transformation isn't magic. It's method, it's structure, it's devotion to the long road, the slow climb, the daily decision to do better. And over time, those small shifts lead to massive changes. You wake up one day and realize you no longer react the way you used to. You're no longer pulled by the same distractions. You've become someone who leads their life instead of chasing it. And you didn't get there overnight. You got there by staying the course, by choosing the path of consistency over chaos, by understanding that transformation is not a one-time act, but a daily practice